Hello YouTube, my name is Andy and this is my first 3D printing video. I'll be going over how to install Octopi on a Raspberry Pi. I will be using the Raspberry Pi Zero, but this process will work on other Pi versions. Since I have the Pi Zero W, I will be using the built-in Wi-Fi. If you have a Raspberry Pi 2 or the original Pi Zero, you'll need a Wi-Fi dongle if you want to make your setup wireless. First, let's go over the things you'll need. Here is the previously mentioned Pi Zero, and we'll take it out so you can take a look at what it looks like. I'll post the link in the description of where I purchased it from, but this is give or take $10 plus extra fees and shipping. I think I got this for like 13. I think 13. I'll post what I got it for. So basically not much to it. You will need to solder any pins to it. It has an SD card slot, micro SD card slot. One of these micro USB ports is for power. The other one's for data. I had that right. A micro HDMI, and then a port for the camera, which I'll be showing in just a second. Next, you're going to need a micro SD card. You'll need at least 8 gigs. I'm using a 32 because I plan on using this for video capture as well, so storing possibly lots of time-lapse videos that I can grab and things. So I'm using a 32. Plus these are really cheap on Amazon. I think this is I think maybe 20 bucks. Again, I'll post it in. This might have actually been only like 12 or 15. I don't know. I'll post the link on everything that I purchased. Next, you're going to need a power source. It's not included with the Pi, but I'm using one of these. What's nice is that the Pi doesn't have an actual power button. So if you use one of these, you can use like an inline button, which is pretty neat if you ever need to turn it on and off. Okay. Now I won't be using this because I'm going to be completely wireless, and this is going to go into a Prusa i3 Mach 3 whenever I get that, sometime this month or next month. But if you need to connect it via USB cable, you're going to want to get one of these, which is a USB dongle or OTG cable. It's got a micro USB port on one side and a full Type A port on the other. And this will allow you to plug in your printer's USB cable into that. Alright, and then last thing you're going to need is, I'm going to use an optional Pi camera. You can use a USB camera, but I don't recommend it. You're just not going to get as good a video or picture quality out of it, and the reason for that is that these plug directly into the GPU on the boards, where the USB cameras have to go through the whole USB port, and then processor has to then do a lot more work. So this is optimized for a Pi, so I would recommend using a Pi cam. Last is a PC or Mac or Linux, whatever you have, and that's because you're going to need to download the image and then write it to the SD card before you put it into the Raspberry Pi. Since these are blank, and I'll be going over that next. All right, so let's go over to the computer. Okay, so now let's start with the actual software portion of putting Octoprint on your create an Octopi distro on a Raspberry Pi. This works for Pi 0, Pi 3, Pi 2, Pi 1, pretty much any version of the Raspberry Pi. So a few things you're going to need for software. You're going to need some way to burn the image to an SD card. Raspberry Pi Foundation recommends Etcher, and it's very simple to use, so I'm actually going to recommend that as well. You're going to need an Octopi image. You can get that from octoprint.org/download. And then to finish up the setup process, you're going to need a way to SSH into the Raspberry Pi and change some settings. So you're going to need to download something on Windows, like download Putty, or if you're on a Mac or Linux, you should be able to just SSH from the terminal. It should be built in, so you shouldn't have any issues with that. I can do a separate tutorial on how to do that, but I'm using a Windows, so we'll use PuTTY today. Alright, so let's load up Etcher. It's a very simple program. Select your image. I'm going to drag and drop the Octopi image. We're going to pick our SD card. So I know that this is the correct SD card. I just put this in. It's going to default try to find something that you plugged in instead of using your C drive or something like that. So it's pretty foolproof as far as that. And then the last thing you do is hit flash. All right, so this is going to take a little bit. It doesn't take that long. Let's see. There we go. All right, so this is going to take about 2 minutes, a little over 2 minutes on this SD card with my adapter. I'm using a USB adapter. The one that I showed you in the image comes with an SD card adapter, but my computer doesn't have an SD card slot, so I'm using a USB adapter. Doesn't matter, but your times may vary for that. Another piece of software you're going to actually want to get is some kind of text editor. I'm going to end up using Notepad++. It's fantastic. I'm going to do this to set up the Wi-Fi on this particular Raspberry Pi. If you're using a Raspberry Pi that doesn't have Wi-Fi, you can still plug it in directly, and you can avoid this step because it'll automatically connect to the internet through a LAN port. But since I'm going to use Wi-Fi, I need to tell the Raspberry Pi what my login and password is for the network, the SSID and the WPA2 key. All right, so our image is installed. It's going to validate it real quick, make sure everything is all peachy, and then it's going to create actually 2 partitions. You're going to want to go into the boot partition. So once this is finished, we'll be able to access the boot partition. And note, if you're using a Mac, you're not going to want to use the default text editor. You can again use some terminal-based text editors. I like Pico, but there's other ones that you can use. It's just quick, easy one to use. But apparently, the default text editor sticks invalid characters when you save the file, so you cannot use that one. Just FYI. And we're almost done. Okay, there we go. So here is our boot drive, which is what we're going to need to then go into. I think it just unmounted, so I will plug it in. All right. So we actually need to edit this file here. If you're going to do the Wi-Fi, you can just right-click it, edit with Notepad++ if you have it already installed. And here we go. So you have a WPA, WPA2 secured one that you're going to want to uncomment these three um, hash parts. If your network uses this one, you can also use WEP secured instead. Open unsecured, whatever. Wired configure, you don't need to do anything. So I'm going to set this up real quick off camera so that I don't give you guys my login and password to my Wi-Fi. But you're going to just hit save, and then we're going to boot up the Pi for the first time. So there's a little bit of step before you do that, or once you insert it into the Pi, SD card has to go first, then you power it on. You can't do it the other way around. Okay, so now that we've installed the SD card into our Raspberry Pi and attached the power cable, it is going to go through a boot up process. You're going to want to give it at least like 30 seconds to finish booting and then connecting to your network for the very first time. You're not going to know exactly where your Raspberry Pi is on your network until your router actually assigns a login. So if you know your router's, if you know how to navigate your router software, you should be able to figure out which device on it is your Raspberry Pi. It's going to have the name Octopi, which I have now 2 on my network, but I know what the IP address of one is. You're going to need to know your IP address of your Raspberry Pi, unless you have Bonjour installed on your Windows PC, and if you have a Mac, you can just use Bonjour because it's built into a Mac. But otherwise, you're going to need to know your IP address, which this computer does not have Bonjour, so I do need to actually figure out my IP address. So I'm going to actually log into my router real quick, get my IP address, and then we're going to load up PuTTY. Okay, so now I know my IP address of the new Raspberry Pi. It's a good thing to, this is kind of a good test to see if it's actually even connected to the network. So if you do not see it, one, either your Raspberry Pi hasn't finished booting, which if it hasn't been like 30 seconds, it should have booted already. Or 2, if your Wi-Fi settings are incorrect in your Octopi network file, TXT file. So I'm loading up PuTTY, and literally all we have to do is type in the IP address of our Raspberry Pi. So I know it is 192.168.1.1664. Alright, so then this is going to pop up the very first time. You can hit OK. We're going to log in as Pi, and the password is Raspberry. It's the same as just about any other distro out there for the Raspberry Pi. Alright, so now we've logged in. You can see that the IP address is here. You can also use octopi.local if you have Bonjour installed. You don't have to put in this. You can actually just type in this instead. Octopi.local part for PuTTY or for Mac, and you can actually get to the same thing. Alright, so we need to just run a simple config that's the same just about on every single Raspberry Pi distro, and that is sudo raspi config. Alright, so you're going to want to change your password for the default user so that it's just more secure, because everybody knows that your password is Raspberry. So let's do that. Alright, so then the next one is we're going to want to go into boot option. Oh wait, no, sorry. We want to go into advanced options. We want to expand the file system, and then since we're doing a Raspberry Pi camera on here, we're going to want to go to interfacing options and hit camera. Would you like the camera interface to be enabled? Hit yes. You can always update these in the future, like if you don't have a camera when you start and you want to add one later, you can just SSH back into your Raspberry Pi, run this config file again, and you can just update it there. I don't think you have to enable the camera for a USB camera. I think that's kind of built in with the USB drivers. So this is just for the particular Raspberry Pi camera. All right, so we are done. So we're going to reboot the Raspberry Pi, and we actually no longer need PuTTY. So I'm going to close that. Now what we do need is to open up a browser, and then we're going to give the Pi like 30 seconds to reboot. And we're going to log back. We're going to just type in the IP address of the Pi. Again, if you're using Bonjour, or you have a computer with Bonjour or a Mac, you can just type in octopi local and it'll boot right. It'll go automatically to where you need to go. And it looks like it's still blinking, so we'll try this. Oh, well, I have a typo here. Missed with my finger. Okay, so you're going to get this screen. The Octoprint is ready and it's reloading the page, and then you'll get the first screens for Octoprint. All right, here we go. And hello. So you're going to get this little setup wizard. It's pretty quick. You're going to want to set up access control. We'll keep access control enabled. All right. You can import Cura profiles. So since we have a Prusa, you can actually download the Cura engine profile from the Prusa website and upload it here. I'm not going to do that now because I actually don't plan on slicing with my Raspberry Pi, especially not the Raspberry Pi Zero. So I'm just going to ignore this for now. This is going to be your printer setup. So Prusa i3. This is going to be for my Mach 3. So we'll set that as the name. Printer bed volume is going to be rectangular. Origin on the Prusa is lower left. It is, I believe, not much has changed. I think they just said the height is 10 higher. So we'll do, this is 250 by 210 by 200. I think there's probably 210 now on this one. But another thing you want to do is this custom bounding box. We're going to do -3. And that's because if you slice anything with the Prusa version of Slicer or Prusa Control on the Prusa Mac i3, there's a little priming strip that gets added before every single print, and that's actually outside of the print area of the 250 by 210 by 200. So if you don't add this custom bounding box, it is going, or actually it's on the Y, so sorry about that. On the Y, we're going to do -3. If you don't add this, you're just going to get an error message every single time you upload something from a different slicer that's custom made for the Prusa printer. If you don't have a Prusa printer, you can pretty much ignore this, I think. I don't actually know what other printers have um, that kind of area that they print outside of. All right. Oh, oops. Forgot to. All right. Let's see if there's anything on the axis that we need to change. No. If you have a different size nozzle, you'll want to put that in now. And there's one extruder. And we'll hit finish. Okay. We're all done. Now we're going to log in for the first time. And there'll probably be an update immediately for you to download and install. And that's pretty much it. Your Octoprint is set up. If you want to see some tutorials on cool plugins for Octoprint, let me know. I like going through them, so we'll update that now. And then if you found this tutorial helpful, then please give me a thumbs up, subscribe, hit that little bell icon, I guess, if you want to be notified for new videos. And have a good day. See ya.